Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We've had a bit of a break. Unfortunately, I'd lost my voice for a few weeks, and thank God it's mostly back, although it keeps going every now and again, so bear with me. So I would like to dedicate this Devar Torah for the Refuah Shlema of Eric Yitzchak ben Miriam, Chava Freidel bat Edita Malka, Harav Shimon ben Sarah, and Harofeh Shemuel Yosef ben Rachel, and Lehavdil ben Chaim Lechaim, given that it's just been Yom HaShoah, also to the souls of my husband's grandparents, Malka and Menachem Gubi, Alehem Shalom, and my cousin Marta Wise, Aleha Shalom, all incredible Holocaust survivors, but who were never victims. So, it's all happening at the moment. We're counting the Omer in preparation for receiving the Torah at Sinai on Shavuot, and in doing so, we're working through the different aspects of our characters, or we should be doing that anyway, with a view to perfecting ourselves before receiving the Torah at Sinai. Now, as I said on the last of our Torah I gave, which was just before Pesach, on the first night of Pesach, we can achieve any spiritual level we want, and we're given the gift of being able to leap straight to that level for free. Okay, we're able to just do that. However, as I said then, during the Omer, we have to prove we meant it. And that means putting in the work. We have to work towards that spiritual level, because nothing in life is free. So we must consider how we can improve ourselves during these weeks leading up to Shavuot, how we can improve various aspects of our character and perfect ourselves. And each week of the Omer, we try and work on one particular aspect of our character. Also, in Israel, Tuesday marked Holocaust Memorial Day, or Holocaust Remembrance Day, and next week, please God, will be Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, and Yom Ha'atzmaut, Independence Day. This Friday and Shabbat is Rosh Chodesh, Iyar, and 2 portions of the Torah will be read in synagogue, as well as the portion for Rosh Chodesh. So as I said, it's all happening this week. The 2 portions which we shall read on Shabbat are tazria and metzora. Parashat Tazria tells us about the wonder of childbirth, amongst other things, what a woman is supposed to do after giving birth to a baby, and the mitzvah Brit Milah of a boy 8 days old. This parasha talks about a lot more than that, but those are 2 of the things I wanted to mention. Afterwards, the parashot deal with the topic of sarat, which is very mistranslated, very commonly mistranslated, I should say, as leprosy, which affects a person after evil speech, lashon hara. Now, the process that a person must go through to correct or rectify the results of that sin is elaborated in the second of the 2 parashot that we read this week, metzora. It surrounds the purification of the person who has had this sarat, this disease. I'm going to refer to it as leprosy for the purposes of this Devar Torah, but please know that it's mistranslated. But it's a skin disease of some description that apparently, at least in biblical times, struck those that guilty of slanderous gossip. This seems, at first glance, to be one of the strangest and most primitive sounding rituals in the whole of the Torah. The word metzora, one who is afflicted with this sarat, this leprosy, is described as and derives from the words motzi shem ra, one who spreads evil talk. So what happens with a person that is struck with this sarat, with this leprosy? The Kohen commands that 2 birds should be brought. The first is slaughtered in an earthenware bowl, and its blood mixed with water from a spring. The second bird is kept alive and immersed in the bloodied waters in the bowl. Sounds very strange, right? But I'll read the English translation. Then he shall sprinkle the mixture 7 times upon the person being purified from the sarat, from this disease. He shall purify him and set the live bird free upon the open field. So he then sprinkles this water on the person who is cured of the sarat, of this leprosy, and the live bird is allowed to fly away free. It's a very strange ritual, right? But if we think about it a little bit deeper, we will see that it is very rich in its symbolism. Let's think about it. Let's analyze it a little bit. So this, as we've said, is a remedy for an affliction which affects those who gossip. So let's look at the Torah prohibition on this. The Torah gives us 3 different prohibitions, which we commonly and collectively call lashon hara, and it's made clear that there are a few averot, there are very few averot, or sins, as serious as speaking lashon hara, or slander, or gossip, or whatever you want to call it. So let's look at the 3 prohibitions. The first is the prohibition of rechilot, which is gossip regarding another person. which may in itself be harmless, by the way, but is no one else's business and can easily lead to evil talk. I'll give you an example. Someone tells his friend the cost of his neighbour's car. Do you know how much he paid for that car? Now that's seemingly harmless, right? Who cares? But it might now get the person thinking about how much the neighbour earns. He can't afford to buy a car like that. So what else is he doing on the side? And we all know how that goes, right? The second is Lashon Hara. This is saying something about someone which may well be true, but should not be spread. Now, interestingly, English law has no prohibition against this. The third aspect of this prohibition is Motzi Shemra. This is possibly the worst one of all. This is disseminating a lie about somebody, what we would call in English law slander or defamation of character. Or defamation of character. We refer to all three prohibitions collectively as Lashon Hara, as I said before. And I'm not telling you anything new when I say that Chazal, our sages, compared spreading Lashon Hara, any one of those three categories, to murder. And it's obvious why. It's obvious that from plenty of unnecessary chatter, reputations have been broken, livelihoods lost, families destroyed, and unfortunately, lives lost. There's an English term for this. Character assassination. It is an assassination. So we see that damage with words can be quite major. Simple words can cause masses of damage. And we saw this from the Tower of Babel when we discussed the parasha of Noach. We talked about this then. So once words leave our lips, there is movement forward, so to speak. So we see that three people are affected and punished by such talk. The ones who tells the talk, the person who tells it over, the one who listens to it, and the one who spreads it further. And with all this in mind, let's analyze the symbolism of the purification process, the purification outlined in this week's parasha. First, let's consider briefly what the point of any sacrifice is. What's the point of all these sacrifices? So in idolatry, the point of a sacrifice was to appease the gods, right? Idolaters believed that the world was run by warring or capricious gods, and humans could only seek to appease or pacify them or bribe them, right? In contrast, in Judaism, humans are full partners with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in perfecting the world. We've spoken about this before. So our sacrifices are not an appeasement or a bribe. They represent the person who brings the sacrifice. The Torah says, Litzonachem, for your will, or representing your desire. That's what the sacrifice is supposed to do. So, for example, in the sin offering, the animal stands in the place of the owner, the person who's committed the sin, reminding him that it is actually he who deserves to die for their sin or misdeed, but for the kindness and mercy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God. And the olah, the whole burnt offering, reminds the person that he should be devoting his whole self to the service of the Almighty in perfecting the world. And so too in the case of the metzora. The slanderous chattering twitters are symbolized by two birds. One is slaughtered instead of the person involved in the gossip, as he's considered to have taken a life, as we mentioned, and the other is sent off to fly away. But why? How does that make sense? What's that for? So the same symbolism was used in a famous story, which you may or may not have heard, but it bears repetition, which is told about someone who asked his Rebbe about how he might gain forgiveness from God for his sin of Lashon Hara, of this idle gossip or malicious slander, whatever it is. The Rebbe instructed him to confess his sin and beg forgiveness for those who he had slandered. He then instructs him to take a feather pillow, bring it to the marketplace, late in the evening when the wind is the strongest, tear the pillow open and allow the feathers to fly, and then set about and collecting all the scattered feathers. Of course, the distraught man returned to the Rebbe that evening, reporting that gathering the feathers was a mission impossible. So it is with Lashon Hara. You never know how far your evil words have spread. Excuse me. It should be obvious that this is one of the easiest prohibitions to transgress. We will do it, even inadvertently. And yet its consequences are astounding and so far-reaching. It is no doubt for this reason that when the Kohen Gadol appears once a year on Yom Kippur before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Kodesh Kodashim, in the Holy of Holies, with the incense sacrifice, it is to atone for the sin of Lashon Hara, of idle gossip or slander, whatever you want to call it, on behalf of the entire Jewish people. It is in the modern world where we have such powerful communication tools at our fingertips constantly, where we can see time and time again the ultimate power that our words have, whether it's written on Facebook, Twitter, and there's no mistake, it's called Twitter, right? And you can see the symbols. I know it used to be called, it's now called X, and it was Twitter, but in the context of this conversation, it's very relevant. It was called Twitter, and the symbol was a bird. Exactly this context. So whether the words are written on Facebook, on Twitter, or wherever they're written, or idle chatter outside synagogue, at a kiddush, at a party, wherever it is, it's very, very difficult to hold back, and we can see how powerful and how easy it is to transgress this. Now, we don't have a Kohen Gadol to atone for us anymore, and Yom Kippur is several months away. So let's try a little harder to consider how what we say could affect others. Let's also remember that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us two gifts, and I've discussed this before. He gave us two gifts that distinguish us from animals: free will and speech, and both of them are relevant here today. Only by using these two gifts correctly and properly can we elevate ourselves from being animals and being proper partners with the Almighty in elevating and perfecting the world as we're meant to, and creating man as we're meant to. We've discussed this before. Na'aseh Adam, okay, let us make man, God says. Who's he talking to? And I discussed at the time, he's talking to us. By using those two gifts, we can perfect man. We can be a partner in creation. Now, it's quite interesting that we're going from the first week of the Omer, in which we attempt to perfect the characteristic of chesed, of loving kindness, boundless love, generosity of spirit, looking positively at the other, non-judgmentalism, all that falls within the characteristic of chesed, of loving kindness. And the second week, which represents gevurah, strength, discipline, self-restraint, all those are represented by this aspect, this characteristic of gevurah. Now, it's a Jewish concept that boundless loving kindness, boundless chesed, is not enough on its own. There must be boundaries to loving kindness, and this must come in the form of gevurah. Discipline, strength, self-restraint. This should also be evident in our speech, as well as in action. And whilst gossip is juicy and entertaining, we must rise above it, exercise self-restraint, and use the gift of speech correctly and properly so that we can become true partners in God's creation. Shabbat Shalom.